So a bit of a late change to the proposed schedule today. We're going back in time in this video to what I did before I found YouTube. That's coming up next. So yes, life before YouTube, as if there was such a thing. This is a series that I've been doing, that I started for my Patreon supporters. My Patreon supporters will have seen a large part of this already. Apologies to them. There'll be another one out for you this weekend. It's a series that I wanted to do because I've got an awful lot of pictures of jobs that I did before I started doing video for YouTube. And the work I was doing back then was much more varied. This particular one covers a bathroom creation. Basically, I turned what was a study and dressing room into a bathroom for somebody in a Victorian terraced house, and it's just going through the whole process and explaining what I did, when and where. I hope you enjoy it. There'll be many more of these to come, and as I say, if you're a Patreon supporter, there should be another one out for you this weekend. Let's go back in time though and have a look at this, where this bathroom was exactly. So this is fairly typical of the type of sort of Victorian squares. There are lots of these in and around London, but in West London in particular. As I say, you've got communal gardens in the centre here, and you've got a row of terraced houses all the way around. And they're all built in the same sort of style and the same sort of pattern. Estate agents would call these substantial these days. They were built originally to have staff, to have servants, and they have, again, typically a raised ground floor and a lower ground floor, so a separate entranceway to the lower ground floor, and then you'd have two additional floors above that. Now in the 1960s and the 1970s, these houses were often converted into flats. These were done in the 60s, and they are typically from that sort of 60s era. They're split into two, so you have the lower ground floor. Let me spin you around. There we go, that's a better view. The lower ground floor is entered through the bottom doorway, and the upper two floors you go through the main, what would have been the main front door of the house, and then you're straight into a little hallway and you go straight upstairs to the upper two floors. Me and my wife started our married life in something very similar to this, a slightly bigger property, but we just had the lower ground floor. It was a basement flat, and when they were converted in the 70s, they were typically chopped into four. So this is a 60s conversion. We go down through the garden gate, down the external stairs into the front door, and then we go to the floor plan. Now, my apologies, I've got a very janky floor plan that I've picked up from online. So let's... to the lower ground floor, we come in through an entranceway and straight into a corridor. To the right, we've got storage, just sort of an old coal bunker. You've got this long, thin corridor past a reception room, little dog's leg down the bottom of the internal staircase. There's a little sort of windowless, airless bathroom in there, little kitchen to the rear, and then right on the back addition they call it, there's what's a small dining room in there. And there's also an entranceway to the rear, little sort of courtyard garden. That's not the actual property that I was working on, it's just one pulled off a estate agent's details. If we wriggle back through to the hallway, to the corridor, and we go up the staircase, immediately at the top of the stairs to our right, obviously it's the same floor plan, you've got the spare bedroom over the dining room, then we go through a large study room, and then at the front there's the master bedroom above the reception. And it's this study room that we're working on, and it's the one that's a bit of a headache. The problem with it is that if you wanted to turn that into anything else, the biggest problem with it is that you've got to go through it to get to the master bedroom. So if you wanted to turn it into almost anything else, another bedroom, for example, you've got to wall that off. I've seen a few that do this by putting the doorway in here, and they do a little dog's leg. It makes this sort of hallway really dark, because obviously the only window is here, facing out onto the courtyard garden. The client is an older lady. She's lovely. She is Welsh. Purely coincidentally, she happened to be born in the same small Welsh village that my dad was born in. As she was getting older, she has no need for a third bedroom. What she needed was a second bathroom. And what we decided to do was to take the study and to section off a little piece of it to make a new shower room and WC. That would then be hers, and if she had anybody to stay in the spare bedroom down here, then they can sort themselves up by going down to the little sort of windowless, airless bathroom downstairs. Of course, we are creating our own windowless, airless bathroom as well. That then left enough space for there still to be a sort of study area by the window, and also she had a desk in here. But what I decided to do was, rather than have this sharp corner here in the room like this, I decided to put a curved wall in, just to soften that off, just to make it flow a little bit better. And that's what I'm going to talk you through now. And that was the job, basically. Now, I'd already had a quick look, I'd scouted through it, I'd seen that the floorboards were running horizontally across the room, which meant that the joists were running vertically, which also meant that I had relatively easy access to the soil stack, the waste pipe. That's the main thing for any kind of conversion or addition to this kind of property. So we could do a straight run from the WC and from the shower, and it would go straight out to the soil stack outside here. Now, obviously, this was a job that I did way before YouTube, before I was doing any video or anything. So I've got pictures of the actual install, and I'm going to run some of those past you now. This is the general site. It's a decent sized room, and you can see obviously how much space it would take up if you did partition that off to make a separate bedroom. I say, just taking this corner away, it was small, it was barely 2 meters square, so you know, it was about as small a bathroom as you can make. It was complicated because of the chimney breast that was here, which means you've got a hearth, a big slate slab in the floor, which, you know, complicates things. And fortunately, the alcove formed by the chimney breast was just big enough to get a shower tray in there. So basically, I marked everything out on the floor and on the walls where I thought the walls would come to, getting it as square as possible. I lifted some of the floorboards up and had a quick scout underneath just to make sure it really was a straight run through, and apart from some sort of bracing bits like this, it absolutely was. And what was interesting actually is when I started lifting some of the other floorboards, you can actually see some of the original communications network. These, I think I said earlier, these properties were built to have staff, to have servants, and you had the original bell wires in there, so you'd have a bell pull. This probably would have been a drawing room originally. You'd have a front reception and drawing room to the rear, so you'd have space for somebody to yank a bell to bring your staff up from the kitchen to bring you tea or sustenance. So yeah, interesting, all these things were still in there, still under the floorboards. Obviously I've lifted some more of the floorboards up as we go. Some of these pictures are a bit dodgy, by the way, because they're often done at the very end of the day where the light's not great, so my apologies for the overall quality. But once the floorboards were up, I could see where the joists needed to be fortified by extra noggins, so I lifted up a little bit more, fitted those in, and managed to get a pretty good space. I knew where the layout was going to be. I knew the WC, the toilet, was going to be at this side, so I knew roughly where the pipe runs would need to be and that sort of thing as well. And first day, I got the stud work up very quickly. It just went up. You know, it's not difficult. It's not complicated to do. It just all goes together pretty simply. It was all planned. I made this wall that had the WC, it would have the toilet cistern in it, from 6x2, and I made this one from 4x2. That was a mistake actually, because I'd forgotten that I needed to get the extractor fan ducting through there as well. I should have made that from 6x2 as well, but it turned out okay in the end. I could pack it out a little bit and it didn't impact too much on the internal areas. So that went up on the first day, and the rest of it went up on the second day. This was going all the way up to the ceiling, and I was going to have storage above this. So that's the basic sort of stud work done. I say it's not complicated. It's just big lumps of timber screwed together, and then I could start forming this curved wall. This was made out of bendy ply, the thin, I think it's might be 6 or 9, I can't remember, but it's flexible. And obviously those two walls have to be pretty parallel, pretty spot on, because as you curve that around, if it's not absolutely straight, they're going to go skewy. It worked out pretty well. I did have to pull the top one in just a fraction to get the two to line up, but this was just glued and clamped, and then while it was in clamps I popped a few staples through there as well, just to make sure it didn't ping off when it was fully set. Again, another picture of that, and one from a distance. So yeah, it was quite a construction, but it went together pretty quickly and pretty easily without any sort of dramas or crises. So next day I've got the flooring in for upstairs, so for the sort of mini loft storage, if you like, and I've got the ducting in for the extractor, and this is where I discovered that I'd made that wall was actually too narrow. I needed to pack that out internally. I wasn't entirely sure what the mini loft storage space was going to be. It turns out it's just for empty suitcases and that sort of thing, but if it happened to be magazines or anything heavy, then I wanted it to be reasonably substantial, so I made it out of standard 6x2 timbers with a 3/4 inch 18mm chipboard roof to it. And this is the kind of space that we've got to work in. It's pretty snug in there. As I say, not the easiest of working conditions, and obviously while I was doing this, I had the bedroom doors all taped up and sealed to minimise the mess. So next day I got the plasterboard, put fresh plasterboard up on the original wall. Again, these are lath and plaster walls, so they're not great for fixing to. So I studded that out and put just regular plasterboard drywall on there. Then I could get a decent fixing to get the towel radiator in there. And again, when I was doing bathrooms, I tended to get the towel right in where I wanted it to be and left it for the plumber to run the pipework to where I need it. That always seemed to work pretty well for me. And then next day I got my electricians in. I had a pretty good team by this time. I had electricians to do all the sparky bits. I had my plumber to do all the wet stuff. He was also gas qualified as well, so he could do all the fiddly bit. I never did find a decent tiler. If I'd have found a decent tiler, I probably might have still been doing bathrooms, but it was too much like hard work when I was doing the tiling myself as well. So first fix of the electrics is in for lights and extractor, and then I got the WC just offered up to make sure it was going to fit in the right place. And also to make sure you weren't banging your knees on the hand basin or something. I haven't made some calamitous error. You can see here where I've studded out the internal wall slightly, just to make a little bit more space. And then first fix plumbing, because this room is directly over the existing bathroom and kitchen, it was relatively easy to get hot and cold water feeds coming up through the floor like that. And that's what the plumbers did, because that's what plumbers do. Very happy to leave all of that to them. Very happy that my plumbing days are well behind me, apart from a dripping tap in the sink, which I must fix. And then it was on to drywalling the outside of the structure, just cladding that to make sure that's all sealed up and tidied up. And then I could do the same to the inside. A little bit of video. This is all I had of this at this stage. Just a quick internal view of plasterboarding the shower area, and a very skinny stud wall where I'm going to put a shelf in to accommodate the hand basin, and then that's the concealed cistern for the toilet in place, and back around again, all the pipework in place, first fix. Again, another late night, late evening shot as it all comes together. I got the shelf in for the little hand basin, which is all fitted without any sort of drama or crisis. And then I could start on the tiling. I didn't actually mind this kind of tiling, to be honest, because the walls were nice and flat and straight. I knew they were because I put them in. We had the first fix on the shower tray as well, so that's all. It's got the waste pipe and everything connected in there. And also tiled the little shelf area for the hand basin to go on. And I've got the internal drywall taped up and sealed. And then got the grouting done in the shower tray, in and around the shower enclosure and behind the hand basin as well. Next step was to get the floor done. Obviously my when the plumber was in doing the first fix and everything. He got the radiator all connected, and he managed to get the feeds through the wall, which is good. I was expecting them to come down to the floor, but he got it in the wall, which is much tidier. And I got the flooring in, which is a pre-finished oak flooring. So there, that's a terrible picture, sorry about that. It's the outside of the, obviously outside of the structure, taped up and filled. That's a better picture. That might be familiar. Yes, this is where I did my curved skirting board. First one I'd ever done, and it worked out really well. Obviously, a little bit of experimentation needed to happen, and there were mistakes along the way, but it went on really nicely, and it's just glued on. I think I might have put a couple of screws in at one end where I could find the stud work, but that worked really tidily. And then the whole thing was painted. I did deliberate as to whether to actually put lining paper around that, and I opted not to, just in case there was any movement over time. Then it would just, you might get a few cracks appearing, which could easily be filled and touched up. Whereas if you put lining paper on it, the lining paper could sort of pull and tear, which is a much more complicated repair to do. That's a little shot of the storage above. Again, just a simple sort of chipboard floor. And I did conceal all the wiring in there as well. And that was that job pretty much sorted. Oh, that was the other thing. I put the threshold strip between the old floor and the new bathroom floor. I made out of one of the old floorboards. There's a little bit of a connection between the two, which is nice. And that worked out pretty well. And that's the final bathroom, all sorted. That's the shower tray in and the shower enclosure, the doors on, everything fitted, lighting in, everything painted and pretty much finished. That's how it fitted in with the rest of the room, and I think the curved wall really did make a difference. Then I came back about a week or two later with my son Jack, and we fitted the bookcase in there. And I also fitted a little cabinet for her to put bits and pieces in, bathroom stuff they don't necessarily want on show. And finally she relented, and we got around to painting the door, which I think looks much better, much nicer finish. And that really was it, pretty much done. The client was very happy with the job. I was very happy with the job I did as well. And I actually popped in and saw her. She's local to me. I popped in and saw her last year, and the job's holding up really well. There's a little bit of very fine surface cracking, although my nice curved wall has been caught by something being carried through. So there's a little bit of other repair work to do. I think the surface cracking is as likely to be due to general sort of movement in the property. These old Victorian properties, like the one I'm living in and shooting this in now, are prone to a little bit of structural movement over time. But that's it for this video, really. As I say, there was a period of my life where I was doing a lot of these sort of bigger kind of builds, and I've got lots of pictures of them, so it's a series that I've started for my Patreon supporters, and thank you so much to all of my Patreon supporters for their continued support of the channel. And there should be another one of those out this weekend on Sunday for my Patreon supporters, so if that tickles your fancy, then do come along and join in. But that's it for this week's video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.